Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. Fantasy week is wrapped up. You now know if you have won or lost. Welcome to that EFIN morning after show podcast / vodcast. It's a podcast, but we also throw the video up. Later on, we'll actually take your calls, which is kind of cool, I think. You can see there, call in 757-598-EFIN. I believe that's 3346. Yeah, 3346. And phone lines will open at 10. We're going to go ahead and do our part of the show and give you guys plenty to talk about. Not that you guys don't have plenty to talk about already, but we're going to add to it. We get you guys fired up this morning. And to do that, I always welcome in NFL writer over at Sportskeeda, the honestly, maybe one of the hardest working guys in sports. Definitely in Sportskeeda. These articles you're cranking all the time. It is the Adam Holz. Adam, welcome to the show yet again. I was honestly just kind of going through them this morning. Look, October 16th, October 16th, October 16th, October 16th, October 15th. You can see them around the screen. I mean, just article after article after article. I mean, when do you sleep, my friend?
Not too often, especially with having, two little kids at home as well. We're cranking out about 100 articles a month. We got podcasts going on. We have other things going on. We like to stay busy. I mean, it's football. We're living the dream, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love having you here, and obviously a lot to go over every week. Let's go ahead and get into the weekly rewind. All right, the weekly rewind, we basically go back and kind of just revisit the weekend as we're all waking up a little bit groggy. Stats go like this. This week, the home teams went 10-5. It's been pretty even over the last 2 weeks, 7-7, 8-8 for weeks 5 and 4 respectively. Visiting teams hold a 4-game edge overall until the home games dominating this week, again with that 10-5, pushing the season record for the home teams ahead of the visiting teams, 47-44. Still pretty even overall. I mean, it's only a 3-game swing. So home field advantage not really having the strength, the importance that it normally does, which when we get into our records for this week, home field advantage actually played a big part in a lot of the picks that we made. What do you make of all this in week 5? You think things will start getting sorted out? Now, I guess in week 5 it did. Again, 10-5, home teams finally taking over. But as for the season, is it just the rust still?
Well, I think it's kind of like a law of averages thing, right? Like, at least for me, as the season goes on, I think we will see it tilt a little bit more towards the home teams. It's hard to judge these things on a short timeline. You kind of have to, look at home versus away, at the end of the year and kind of see where it, lays out. There'll be some weeks where the away teams do good. And also with the home field advantage, I think it's also important, too, that not all home field advantages are created equal, right? It's a lot more difficult to play in places like Denver and Kansas City and New Orleans and Seattle than it is to play in Jacksonville.
No, I mean, that's true. I mean, definitely there's stadiums like Seattle. Seattle's obviously a place you don't really want to play, or most people don't like to. We've had the London games. We've had quite a few London games, so I think that kind of factors in as well. It's just, I expect the home team to have a little more.
Trevor Lawrence doing his thing in his home away from home in London.
Right? I mean, that's why they put him here. That is the plan. That is the move. And I guess we'll see how that all plays out as it goes on. Real quick, and we're going to get more into this when well, you know what? Let's just save it for the records. I was going to go talk about who won each game, but you know what? We're gonna visit that in just a second. So before we talk about our records, if you guys know, on that EFIN Sports Show, Adam and myself, we went through every team week by week. We predicted the schedules, and we're gonna let you know how that's going in those records. But during the rewind, let's talk about some of the big headlines this week. And as it is every week, it's got to be injuries. CMC goes down. Honestly, three of the 49ers' big starters go down. Purdy does not have a great week. And we have no more undefeated teams left as the Eagles cough one up too.
Yeah, I mean, as a Cowboys fan, it was a beautiful weekend for me. Let me just say that. The 49ers lose, the Eagles lose, the Cowboys win. Great week 6.
Steelers did not lose, so I can't call it a bad weekend because they were on the bye. CMC going down. They're trying to say things are optimistic. Debo looks good. Looks like he's going to be fine. CMC, they're saying optimistic. That's going to be one of the big waiver wire talks when we get to there. It definitely hurt their game, and I dare say it could be the big reason that the 49ers dropped this game this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. We'll see where CMC stands. We have seen in the past that Shanahan's been able to work around running back injuries, pretty well, better than anybody. Look, CMC is not just any running back. We obviously know that. But, with some time to prepare, that game did not go the Niners' way this past weekend. With the way the injuries happened, they weren't prepared for it. That was the most adversity that Brock Purdy has really faced in a game, minus maybe the NFC Championship game against the Eagles when he got hurt himself. So, just tough spot for them against arguably the best defense in the NFL right now.
You would put Cleveland above San Francisco at this point.
They're right up there.
Yeah, no, I'm not right arguing with you. I'm just trying to get your view here.
The way that Cleveland's defense has carried them in a couple of games this year, despite their offense really not doing much and them having a winning record at this point of the season, not to take anything away from San Francisco's defense, but their offense is really good as well, that they don't necessarily have to lean on the defense. There's so much more pressure on the Cleveland defense, and they're stepping up and they're getting it done.
Another big story, obviously, before we get into the kind of game by game analysis, if you will, during the record watch, is that the Eagles drop theirs to the Jets. We're going to get more into that later, but big surprise, or I'm not going to say expected, but maybe I knew this was going to be a tough game. All week I've been saying the Eagles could lose this game. We'll get into see how we predicted it earlier, but there it is.
Well, the Eagles were in decent shape, and then Jalen Hurts made a terrible decision at the end of that game, throwing that interception. Look, it was a bad play call in my opinion too. They should have ran the ball again there. That's what I would have done if I was them. But with the throw, it has to be a smart throw if you're going to throw it. That wasn't a smart throw. The Jets made them pay. So, good for the Jets. By the way, side note, that is the first time in Jets history that they've ever beaten the Philadelphia Eagles.
Wow. Did not know that. That's a good stat right there. So you're going to get lots of good stats during this show this week. Tell us about your fantasy weekend. Phone lines are open at 10. You can hit the comments below. Until then, however, weigh in on how your fantasy weekend went, because honestly, we want to know. We like these things. That's got to rewind some of the big things that happened. We will get more into that during the record watch. Like I said, we did every team, every game, and kind of talked about where everybody was going to end up. We used that as a platform to talk about this week's games. This is what we're going to do right now. The records, I went 10-5. Adam went 9-6. Last night's game kind of being the deciding factor there of who was going to come out ahead. Surprisingly enough, Adam did not pick the Cowboys.
Yeah.
It was one of those games that we expected offense from both, and you kind of gave it was that home team win. You said Chargers going to be at home, Dallas going to be coming in probably a little beat up off the San Francisco game, and the Chargers would be able to pull it out, which they almost did. It came down to the end, which I like. I think that's what the audience wants to see. But yes, your Cowboys lost, and so you go one down this week in the record, which puts me up by 2. I'm 58-35, puts you at 56-37. Pretty dang close. Pretty well done overall. Um, as far as the records and the record watch, how what are you taking away from that?
I mean, I feel pretty good about where the records stand right now,
Mhm.
considering all of the unknown variables that were in play when we made all of those picks. I'd say we're each doing a really good job when you consider all of that. And yes, with me picking against my Cowboys on Monday Night Football, it was one of those situations where I said, I can't pick them to win every game, right?
Yeah.
Had to pick
Mhm.
a couple spots where they're going to lose with the Chargers coming off of a bye and the Cowboys coming off of, a grudge match with the San Francisco 49ers. It just kind of felt like one of those spots where they could lose a game, especially with the Cowboys on the bye week this week. But I'm glad I
Absolutely.
was wrong. Let's just say that.
Well, so this week we'll run through the games, then we'll run through the players like we do every week. Um, the Broncos suck again. They continue to suck. It's not what we were hoping for. It's not what we predicted to happen this season. It is still only week 5, but it's not really looking any better as they fall to the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. Not the Chiefs are looking fantastic. We'll get into that later, but the Broncos, honestly, they just don't really seem to be showing any improvement, and that's the problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, last year, Russell Wilson, the excuse was, Nathaniel Hackett was a disaster of a head coach. Sean Payton let everybody know about that when he was hired, saying that Hackett did the worst head coaching job in the history of the NFL. Well, he ain't doing much better with the same situation that Hackett had. Is Russell Wilson just really done at this point? To Russell Wilson's credit, he hasn't played bad this year. He's played a lot better this year than he
Much
did
better.
last year. Statistically, he's just not winning games. And the
Yeah.
defense is just atrocious.
Well, and see, and the problem is you've got Stroud's winning games, Dobbs has
Yeah.
won a few games, Minshew's coming in, he won a game, uh, and you got your number one guy Wilson who's not winning games. That's a problem. That's going to be even Zach Wilson is
It's a
you know
major problem, especially when you look at his contract, how much money they committed to Russell Wilson to make them a Super Bowl contender. Not only are they not a Super Bowl contender, they're a bottom 5 team in the entire NFL. It's over 2 years now. It's crazy.
and what's sad is you're right that Russell is playing better, but you look at those stats, he's got 12 touchdowns, and that's huge.
Yeah,
12 touchdowns
statistically,
is
he's
good.
been okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
12 touchdowns is good enough for number 4. He's only
Mm-hmm.
got 4 interceptions. Guy's
Yep.
been sacked 19 times, though.
Mm.
19 times. That's fifth. That's fifth worst. You got Sam
Yeah, that's
Howell, you
more
got
than three
Daniel
a game.
Jones, you got
Oof.
Justin Fields, and then you got Russell Wilson. I mean, that's not going to do. That's not going to get it done.
Yeah, when you're getting sacked more than 3 times a game and your defense is giving up like 600 yards a game, it is very hard to compete. But they're paying him to be that guy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're paying him to be a top 5 quarterback, not a serviceable top half of the league, pretty good stat quarterback. They're paying him to be Patrick Mahomes. You know what I mean? He's supposed to
They're
be
paying him to
in that
win
tier.
games.
Yeah, he's supposed to be
It's not doing it.
Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, that even when everything around them isn't going well, they're still going to find a way to win some of those games because that's what they're being paid to do. And that's not what Russell Wilson's doing right now.
And look, we can keep making excuses because you're right. The defense isn't helping
Yeah.
anybody except fantasy players because we know exactly who to play every week. You look
Yeah.
at people that are playing against Denver every week, but you know at some point, I understand the defense isn't helping you, but you got to help Russ too. Russ is trying to cook. Again, fourth in touchdowns, only 4
Mm-hmm.
interceptions, but 19 sacks. Hard to win games like that. The Ravens pull one out. They allow their first rushing touchdown on the year to King Henry. King Henry finishes at RB5 this week, but the Ravens pull out the win to move to 4-2. Commanders beat the Falcons. It's funny that we were watching this. Everybody was watching this game to see which one was going to come out on top. It looked good for fantasy points, and it wasn't bad for fantasy points, honestly. And the Commanders just happened to come out on top on this one. I don't know if it was like if we call this a pretty game, but
No, it was a tough, hard fought, back and forth type of game. Uh, Bijan let me down in this one, though. I was expecting
yeah,
more out of Bijan. He was one of my big DFS guys that I paid up for this week, and he didn't quite deliver. He didn't have a bad game, but I thought this would be a boom week, and it was not that.
yeah, you expect a little bit more.
Yeah.
Good morning, David. Glad to have you on the show. Appreciate you being here. Let's see. What else do we got? We got the Browns knock off the 49ers, hand the 49ers their first loss. Brock Purdy did not look great. Still hasn't thrown an interception. But finally, this is crazy. When you say it like this, and I understand, we can put it in perspective, hand Brock Purdy hit the first loss of his entire career. Short-lived career. It's not even a full season's worth of resume here, but it is kind of astounding that over 2 seasons, crossing over, this is his first loss. So little props there to Brock Purdy. But as you stated a little earlier, the Browns defense just too much. They got shellacked the week before. Wake up call. They get the bye week, I guess, and they come out swinging and knock off the 49ers.
Yeah, and I mean, watching that game too, I mean, the first drive of the game, the 49ers just went right down the field with ease, scored right off the bat, and immediately I'm thinking, just like everybody's probably thinking, oh boy, this game's going to be ugly. The 49ers are just going to blow them out of the water in this one, but props to that Browns defense. They shook that first drive off, they locked in, and they shut them down for the rest of that game and gave not even Deshaun Watson, PJ Walker won that game for the Cleveland Browns.
Get the guy a win. Why not? David brought up the turnovers in the Falcons-Commanders game. He's absolutely right. That has something to do with it. It wasn't the only game where that played a factor, as we'll see later on. Texans take on the Saints.
You got Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder. What do you expect?
Well, yeah. Texans take out the Saints. Again, in an ugly game, Saints defense should have stepped up. Michael Thomas did not, as predicted by myself on Wake Up TSS Fantasy Sunday mornings. I said Michael Thomas is feckless. Feckless was the Fox word of the week. And Michael Thomas proved himself to be just that. Great game, especially if you're a Dolphins fan. Dolphins just take it to the Panthers. I think we knew this was going to happen. Waddle finally gets in the end zone. It was just a good day to be a Dolphin. And as their 0-6 record show, I don't think I'm going to do so well in my predictions.
Yeah.
The Dolphins show why they sit atop the AFC East right now.
Hey, and I mean, the Panthers got off to a 14-0 lead in that game. They scored the first 2 touchdowns of that game, but it never felt like, even when they were up 14-0, it never really felt like the Dolphins were in trouble. At least for me. Like, I trusted that 14-0 was going to be nothing for them. They'd easily overcome it. They did. They blew them out of the water. This Dolphins offense is crazy. And I mean, even when we're talking from a fantasy perspective, if you want to talk about some of the highest scoring players in each position, like each week, just say a Dolphin. Like just pick a Dolphin at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and they're going to be in the top 5, it seems like, every week.
That's your DFS picks of the week right there. Dolphins, and Dolphins. Pick them. Yep. Next week, they get tested a little bit. Philadelphia coming off the loss, looking for some revenge. Then they get that New England defense. They get the Kansas City defense in Germany. So really, and then they get the bye. So the next 3, we're really going to see what they're made of.
Man, how great is that Sunday night football game coming up, man? Eagles-Dolphins, that is a good matchup. And look, I hope this isn't the case, but potentially a Super Bowl preview. 2 teams that have Super Bowl on their mind this season, coming from different conferences. Very fun game to watch.
Speaking of the Dolphins, let me see if I can get this up here. Speaking of the Dolphins-Philly game, champs versus chumps on Tuesdays. Judge Jordan presiding as both sides represented by this week's super fans to see who's going to win this game. Watch as they make their case. Judge Jordan rules. That is Champs versus Chumps tomorrow night at 9 p.m. on the Fantasy Sports Corporation. Judge Jordan presiding, and they will cover that Sunday night game. It's always a lot of fun. Make sure to go check that out. We continue on. We'll pick it up because I know you guys want to get more into these fantasy stats for last week, this week, upcoming. Bengals knock off the Seahawks. Bengals still in must-win mode, but they get that win. Good game. I liked it. Burrow still moving around, both sides fighting, fantasy numbers on both sides. It was a good one. Vikings outlast the Bears 19-13. Jags over the Colts. What we expected, I think. Not big numbers from Lawrence. ETN putting up huge numbers finally. Probably didn't do a lot for people except in DFS because people probably have already sat ETN by now. But Jags beat the Colts. We'll talk more about Minshew later. Raiders over the Patriots. Patriots continue to lose. Garoppolo continues to find a way. Rams over the Cardinals. In a dominating fashion. Lions beat the brakes off the Buccaneers. Jets over Eagles, as we talked about. Bills over Giants, but it was a close one. The Bills 100% could have lost that game, and it's not because of the great play from the Giants. Honestly, the Giants, Tyrod Taylor lost that game at the end of the first half by audibling to the run. If you saw it, it was the wrong call, and it was absolutely the deciding factor in that game.
100%. I mean, even if they get the field goal there, theoretically on that last drive of the game, they wouldn't have needed the touchdown. They would have needed 3 to beat the Bills. Look, the Bills played a terrible game.
Yeah.
In my opinion, very sloppy across the board with a lot of things. But that's what great teams do is they can overcome those things sometimes. They can win ugly sometimes. We saw the Chiefs recently do that against the Jets in that game that the Jets should have beat them but couldn't get it done. And sometimes that's just the difference between good teams and bad teams if you find a way despite adversity.
Yeah, Bills defense not looking good at all. And then, of course, the Cowboys outlast the Chargers. Late game interception. Yep, defense comes through. We talked about it last week's show. I told you the defense was going to be what they had to overcome. I did pick the Cowboys on the show, and I picked them during the season-long stats as well. That defense is just, it's nasty. And after the getting beat by the 49ers, and, Micah Parsons had a point. The scoreboard did not reflect the game that the Cowboys played. The Cowboys played a good game. The statistics back that up, and that defense is for real. They came through last night, and the Chargers win. David talked about props. If you saw it, 3 different games where the losing team covered his props and the winning team didn't. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. He did have a question before we get into the record watch. Dolphins offense versus Browns defense. Who wins?
I'll take the Dolphins offense, man. Like when it comes to any defense or any offense, like we rank the units as they are, like the Dolphins right now, offense has to sit at the very top of that list. There, hasn't been much of an answer for it yet. The only team that really slowed them down was the Bills. The Bills defense really showed up for that game and really slowed down that offense that looked unstoppable at times. But hey, let me just say, before this year started, I said with a healthy Tua, the Dolphins are one of the best, very best teams in the entire NFL, and that a healthy Tua for a full season is going to be in the mix for an MVP. All of that's coming true right now as long as he can stay healthy.
And look, let me take that a step to the next level too, because this is what is actually going to happen twice, maybe 3 times this season. So we'll get this answer, but Dolphins offense versus the Jets defense. Who wins that one?
Oh, give me the Dolphins all day in that one. Yeah, give me the Dolphins all day in that one. I mean, look, props to the Jets defense. They've been playing very good, and they are a very good defense. I've kind of said this all along, and I still feel this way, that their defense is slightly overrated to me. They are a top 5 defense, but they're not like this crazy elite unstoppable type of defense that some people make them out to be. Some of their own players before the year saying that they're comparable to the 85 Bears. I mean, give me a break on that. To
Maybe
me,
a bit
they
much.
don't get enough sacks and turnovers to be in like that other tier of defenses. They're a very good defense. They shut down offenses very well. Props to them this weekend also because they did it without their top two cornerbacks. So, I'm not like trying to downplay the Jets defense. I just don't agree with the people who put them as like a generational defense.
I hear you. They're gritty, and I like it. I like how they step in there, and they get the job done. I agree. San Francisco's ahead of them. Cleveland's ahead of them. Dallas is ahead of them. But I mean, they
Yes.
just knocked off the Eagles, so I'm not gonna, downgrade them too much. Like you said, top five. I'm definitely on board with that. Brian from the Injured List podcast. Go check out the Injured List. With Dr. Brian. As horrible and incompetent as my Giants offense has been, their defense has kept them in games they had no business hanging around in. Not not a completely inaccurate statement. In the games that where the defense could do something, I guess they've at least kept the team around. Especially last night. I will apply that to last night. That without the defense, doing what they did, and it wasn't spectacular. I don't think Brian's trying to put them in that top five area. He's just saying that they're doing everything they can to help this injury riddled, talent lacking offense in games.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the Giants' defense has been okay, and they've been like limiting damage is kind of what they've been doing. But
They're
look,
not the
like
Broncos.
similarly with the Giants' defense, is like they're not making any game-changing plays, though, right? Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like burying the Giants, but like they have like no sacks this year. Like the Giants as a team have like literally like no sacks this season. I'm not sure exactly where they rank, but it has to be way towards the bottom of the league, like maybe on like the very bottom of the league, because they never get sacks. And same thing with the interceptions too. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're limiting damage, but they're not creating havoc or making true game changing plays to really support an offense that is absolutely lost right now.
The Giants sit at 28 in sacks with 0, along with the Carolina Panthers, the Patriots, the Steelers, and the Packers. The Steelers have no sacks on the season. No, that was on the week. Hold on. Let me
No. That must be
update
this
that.
week. That must be
Yeah,
this week.
let me update that there because I know that's not true. Let's go back to Giants are dead last in sacks. They do have 5. They have 5 sacks, which is good enough for
5
dead last. Next is the Bears with
in
9. So they
6
have
games.
four less than the other guys. They sit at 3 interceptions, which only the Eagles, Browns, Titans, Dolphins, and Patriots have worse. Although kind of surprising that the Eagles, Browns, I mean, 2 top 10 defense. We talked the Browns being maybe in the top 3, if not the best. Titans have been doing great against the run, not so much otherwise. Miami's defense getting it done, but not 21 sacks for Miami's defense, only 2 interceptions. And the Patriots are supposed to be known for their defense. Again, only 2 interceptions. So Eagles, Browns, Titans, Dolphins,
Yeah, but a
Patriots,
lot of
only
those
with 2
teams, they're
interceptions.
at least
Crazy.
getting their sacks. You know what I mean? Like a
Uh-huh.
lot of those teams are at least getting their sacks.
They
You know,
are.
like interceptions can sometimes be a product of opportunity, can be a product of the opposing quarterback. You'd obviously love to capitalize on it, but as long as you're getting sacks consistently, that does change games.
It
Sacks
does.
and drives often, like even a sack on first or second down, often results in a 3 and out. You know, like you put them behind the 8 ball, and now instead of, 2nd and 7, you're looking at 2nd and 17 or something like that. It's a big difference on the way that the game flows.
No, it's absolutely huge. It's absolutely huge. Let's get into this week's record watch, where we'll also start talking about players and bringing that down too. Record watch. We talked about myself going 10-5, Adam going 9-6. I'm 58-35. He's 56-37 on the season as we break down every team. We did all right this week, but here are some of the numbers that you guys are looking for. Did you know? Well, before we do that, I do want to get into the numbers But I digress because I want to talk about the records for this week in the sense that we did well. Again, I went 10-5, you went 9-6, which is good. Carolina is not showing up this year at all, like I thought they would. Indianapolis did with their rookie. Houston did with their rookie. Bryce Young is not getting it done. And even you had Carolina down for 5 wins, and right now they sit 0-6. It's not good. It's not good for at least I'm going to take a bigger hit with this than you are, but Carolina just wow. Riverboat Ron having a hard
Yeah,
time.
and like with those rookie quarterback type of situations, I always expect, teams with rookie quarterbacks to be better later in the year than they are early in the year with that tough, adjustment type of situation to the NFL speed. And Bryce Young has not been very good this year, but to his credit, he has played much better in the last 2 games. It still hasn't equated to wins, but when you
Mm-hmm.
look at his numbers over the last 2 games, he has seemed to have taken a small step forward.
Yeah, Brian says he loves the show. Keep it rocking. Thank you, Brian. We will do just that. You mentioned that Bijan let you down. He let us both down. We both missed on
Yeah.
that one. Really a toss-up game. Anybody could have won that game. Washington comes out on top. I don't really feel too bad about dropping that one. The Houston game, we had picked New Orleans to win that game. We didn't expect to see this Houston team that we got. Um, we'll talk about where Stroud sits on the top 10 list this week. They're finding ways to get it done. I really don't know how. New
Look, they're
Orleans,
not beating themselves. Like that's kind of how it's been done. Like their defense has played good enough under D'Amico Ryans. Stroud's been fantastic. I
he
know
really
he
has.
threw his first interception finally. After that historic streak to start his career. But look, like
Brock Purdy's
you
like,
can win games as long as you have a quarterback who's playing smart, a defense who's playing competent, and you're not beating yourself. A lot of these teams who have been disastrous, they're destroying their own chances to win. You know what I mean? Even a team like Denver, like we talked about, when they give up, 500 yards a game, their defense does, and the other team scoring all the time, it's very hard to win like that. When your quarterback's throwing 2 interceptions a game, it's like, how are you going to win like that? You know what I mean? Now, look, the Texans are by no means a contending team. I don't even consider them any shot at making the playoffs this year, but they've
sure.
looked pretty good so far. And this has shown that that can be a formula that competes in every game in the NFL. Keep it close. Don't make huge mistakes. Don't beat yourself and just be smart.
Look, the Jets are 2 games out of first in the AFC East at 3-3. As soon as Rodgers went down, look, I'm not overinflating what 3-3 is, and obviously in week 5 everybody's only a couple games out of first. But when Rodgers went down, I don't think anybody expected the Jets to compete, and the defense has really given the offense the chance to win games, and they've gotten a couple done.
I mean, is Rodgers coming back this year? Like, is he really coming
He
back
can't
this
be.
year?
He can't
He's
be,
on the
right? He
field
can't
before
be.
the game throwing passes. He's
No
walking
boot
around
on.
without a boot. He's not even limping. Like, I don't know what's going on, but like, I still don't think he's coming back. But like, to me, it's not 100% anymore because he seems obsessed. Like, what drives Aaron Rodgers is proving people wrong, and he likes to show everybody how smart he is and how his alternative approach to things and his non-traditional methods, how great they are. That's what he's all about, right? And he's
Mm-hmm.
saying he's doing this non-traditional recovery process and non-traditional surgery, and the timeline that people are giving him is based off of conventional wisdom, which he's not doing. Look, whether he's ready or not to play, I think he is going to try to force himself back onto the field at some point late in this year. It'll depend if the doctors allow him, if the Jets organization allows him. But he is driven right now by proving that he's smarter than everybody else. And I think because of that, he's really going to try to do this.
He's trying to get it done. Phone lines are open. Phone lines this week are brought to you by TSS Fantasy Waiver Wire. On every Tuesday, the boys get you ready for the waiver wire. Dr. Miller, yes, he's a real doctor, comes on for house calls talking about injuries of the week, what to expect. Mr. Mallard, sophisticated pickups, week 6 flops, Thursday night preview, and more on TSS Fantasy Waiver Wire Tuesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. Go check them out on the Fantasy Sports Core channel.
Love me some TSS fantasy, man. Those guys are
I
awesome.
really do. It's so fun. AFC North Ravens sit on top because the Steelers didn't play. Steelers, of course, own the tiebreaker there, so we're just waiting for that bye week. But super tight, as we expected right now in the North. Ravens, that one game up with 4 wins. Everybody else has 3. That's kind of what you expect in the NFC North, I think, right? Super tight division.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of said that coming into this year that, all 4 of these teams can be competitive. The Bengals are doing just enough to hang around. They haven't looked like the Bengals. But, again, it's that same theme we've been talking about, right? Like everything's going wrong for the Bengals, yet they still have 3 wins. And when things do click, they're right in position to make a run.
Absolutely. And we're only 5 games in, but that's all right. 6 games. 6 games. Sorry. AFC South, Jags sit on top as expected. Colts and Texans 1 game back. Titans kind of, as expected, as advertised. Two first round QBs in a row. Tannehill still in there. Henry having a rough go of it. I think the AFC South is looking pretty much exactly how it's supposed to. We'll talk about Richardson and Minshew coming up in the pulse check. The South is exactly what it's supposed to be right now.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Maybe the Texans are better than advertised. Maybe the Texans are actually the second best team in that division after the Jaguars.
Could be. We'll find out. AFC West, Chiefs sit on top as expected, although not in the manner we expected, not dominating. We'll talk about the Chiefs offense in the pulse check as well. Raiders, 1 win above the Chargers, and Broncos in dead last. I think consensus wise, like overall, this is what we expected at this point of the season. And we're just kind of waiting to see if the Chargers are going to rise up, and we're waiting. We expected the Broncos to have gotten better already. So I guess we're kind of waiting to see how that's going to play out 1/3 of the way through the season.
Yeah, I mean, I can admit I was dead wrong on the Broncos. I thought they were going to be a much different this team than they were last team. I expected them to be playoff contenders for sure this year. There's still time. There's still 2/3 of the season left to get things going. But it's not looking promising. Like that prediction is going to, come true for me.
Not great. Phone lines are open. Give us a call at 757-598-EFIN. Join the show. We want to hear how your fantasy weekend went. In the AFC, Eagles sit on top. Cowboys 1 game back. Commanders 1 game back of that. And the Giants just horrible this season and shot themselves in the foot this week we talked about. But again, NFC East looking exactly how it's supposed to look. Eagles on top. Cowboys in contention. We're waiting for them to overtake it. And Commanders just kind of keeping everybody motivated along the way.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly how I felt about the division before the season, that the Commanders are a disaster. You can't tell me that Sam Howell is your future starting quarterback. Don't buy it at all. The Giants were the biggest frauds in the NFL last year, and they're showing everybody why this year. And the Eagles and Cowboys are 2 of the most legit teams in that conference.
Yeah, Sam Howell, we'll talk about him coming up as well. NFC North, Lions sit on top at 5 wins. Everybody else way back. Packers 2, Vikings 2, Bears 1. Exactly what we predicted during our season rankings. I'm not even going to really get into it. In fact, you didn't have as much faith in the Lions. I guess we could hit that real quick. But I mean, they're right.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Lions were being a little bit overhyped coming into this year. Through 6 games, I'm completely wrong. Like the Lions do look absolutely like a legit contender to possibly even win the NFC conference. That's how good they're playing. They're going to have to do so without Montgomery now, it sounds like. Sounds like he's going to be out for a little while. That could be a big problem for them with how much they run the ball. But if Jahmyr Gibbs can get healthy, here's his opportunity.
Check the TSS Fantasy Waiver Wire show tonight at 9 p.m. to hear more about Montgomery from Dr. Miller. He is a real doctor. He'll tell you more about that injury, how long it's going to last. NFC South, Buccaneers, Falcons, Saints, all tied at 3. Panthers, all tied up at 0 for the worst record in the NFL right now. It's a dogfight in the NFC South. We wait for the Saints to get it together. I don't know if they will, but nobody else is looking very great either.
Yeah, I mean, we said before the year that the two Souths were probably the two worst divisions in the NFL, and we're probably right about that.
Yeah, I think that's
maybe the NFC North, kind of, but like the NFC South feels like the one division that doesn't have at least like a really good team in it. The Saints are not a really good team. They're probably the best team in that division, but in most
we said
divisions,
they were going to win by default.
Look, the NFC South is the only division that the Saints would be the best team in. This is the only division where they would be the top team, right? Every other division has a better team than the Saints, which shows you how bad the NFC South is.
And look, even at 0-6, this is the only division where the 0-6 team still has a chance to win the division. Let's be honest about it. There are 3 games back, but it's the NFC South, and the Panthers could 100% turn this around and win this division with a losing record.
Yeah, there's no reason to have faith in any of these teams right now. None of them.
At all. 49ers sit where they're supposed to sit on top of the NFC West. Seahawks right behind. Rams tied with them, and Cardinals at the bottom. Exactly how we said it was going to play out. Exactly how everybody said it was going to play out, honestly. Although I do have the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl at the end of the day.
Look, I mean, a lot of the things that we said about the Texans, or that I said about the Texans with playing smart and, not beating yourself and competing, though it hasn't translated into a bunch of wins, that's what the Cardinals are doing too, right? They've been in pretty much every game that they've played, and they've been competitive in those games. They just don't have that quarterback to get them over the top. In a tight game, you need to make a couple plays down the stretch at the end. Dobbs has been fine, but he's not that guy. The difference is Stroud just might be that guy.
Arizona's next 3, at Seattle, Baltimore, at Cleveland. Things not looking any better for Arizona. Don't expect any wins in their future. That is the record watch for this week. We move into the rapid Pulse check.
Code blue. Oh my God!
I might change that one up. It's a little more injury-based, but it's supposed to show us urgency. But what's going to happen here, we're going to run through some subjects from this week and throughout the NFL. I'm going to hit Adam with a statement. He does not know what the statements are. He's going to give me his automatic reaction. Give us yours in the comments, or you can even call us, 757-598-EFIN. Join the show and tell us about your fantasy week, or just give us your opinions on what we are about to go through. This is the Pulse check. Richardson. Should he have this surgery? He's been doing great. He could come back. He could still finish out a respectable season. If not, give them a winning record. We don't know how he would play, but very much considering the surgery, coaching staff supporting that. Is it Minshew time in Indianapolis? Should Richardson have this surgery?
If I'm Richardson, I'm having the surgery. It's his rookie season. You don't want to do something that's going to jeopardize your long-term success just to get back out there and continue your rookie year. Look, he's supposed to be the guy for the Colts. They took him at the top of the draft for a reason. Take care of your health now. The Colts are not going anywhere this year. Even if they somehow sneak into the playoffs, they're not competing in the playoffs. They're not there yet. So get ready for next year. Keep building around Richardson. Get healthy and focus on the future.
Can Minshew get them that winning record, though?
I mean, I guess he could. I mean, he didn't make a good case for himself last week. He played awful against his former team, the Jaguars. And again, it's almost better, in my opinion, for the Colts, especially if it's going to be Minshew the rest of the year, to kind of lose, right? Because even if they somehow sneak into the playoffs, which I don't think they will, as you know, mediocrity is the worst place to be in the NFL. Right? If you're not competing for championships, you're better off being at the bottom of the barrel, getting those higher draft picks, having more capital to kind of make some moves and kind of go in that rebuilding. Floating in that middle area is no man's land.
Yeah, 100%. Colts racking up Cleveland next, then New Orleans, then at Carolina, finishing in Germany. with New England before heading into the bye. So,
The
Cleveland,
schedule's not bad. Not
I
bad.
mean, you don't want to play Cleveland's defense right now. New Orleans has a good defense, but they're beatable. And then like you said, Carolina, New England, obviously games you can win before you go into the bye. So, I mean, Minshew might be good enough, but like you said, the wins might not be what is best for them at this point. Jets defense, is it enough? You kind of already touched on this already. Jets defense getting it done, keeping the offense in it enough that they've won a couple games. They got a bye this week. Then they have the Giants, they got the Chargers, and they got Vegas in the next three. So, especially with the Giants, Chargers, and Las Vegas on the slate, can the defense keep them in this race?
They can. Look, despite what I said about their defense being a little bit overrated, they are still a top 5 defense, which I stated also. And when you look at those matchups coming off of a bye as well, it's, reasonable to say that they could go 3-0 in those games. They can definitely go 2-1 in those games. Look, the Jets, we knew the defense was going to be good. We knew they would probably be able to run the ball. But the Jets right now, the difference between last year and this year is that Zach Wilson has not been turning the ball over. He hasn't been great. Zach Wilson's not winning them games either, but he's not turning it over. And look, it seems like the theme of this episode has been don't beat yourself, give yourself a chance, and maybe you can make it happen in the end. And the Jets have done that the last couple of weeks.
Dallas gets the bye to rest up, figure some things out. Then they come off the bye against the Rams, the Eagles, the Giants. We'll just keep going. Carolina, Washington, some really good matchups coming up for them. Dallas has won games. The defense is absolutely dominating and making it possible to overcome Dak's mistakes, but this offense has to get better. They get a chance with some good matchups. Honestly, I don't know they're really challenged that much except for Philly. Can Dallas get better? Can they get good enough to actually do something in the postseason?
I think that they can. Remember, they did change offensive coordinators, so it is still, a little bit of a learning curve with that as well. And look, let's not take anything away from Dak this week. Last night was his best game of the season so far. Dak played very well last night. He made some good throws. He made things happen with his legs when he needed to as well. Even look, small things like Dak took sacks at the right time last night. He didn't force something when he felt the pressure coming. There was a couple plays where he just kind of tucked it in and said, I'm going to accept the sack on this one rather than risk throwing the interception. And that's game management. If it's not there, don't do something crazy. And he didn't. Again, he made things happen with his legs. I think the bye is coming at the perfect time right now for the Cowboys.
Yes.
They got the bad taste out of their mouth. They had to win last night. They could not go into the bye with a 3-3 record coming off consecutive losses going into the bye week. That could not happen for the Cowboys. That would be disastrous. Getting that win last night, again, getting the bad taste out of their mouth from the 49ers loss, now going into the bye on a positive note with things to build on. I think coming out of it, look, you just named their next few games. It's a pretty favorable schedule coming out of the bye as well. I think the Cowboys can really get things rolling now.
We had a lot of faith in Kansas City. The faith is waning, not necessarily for the wins, but just on the offensive production. Kansas City's getting it done, but they're not dominating. That offense isn't there. That wide receiver room, like we talked about at the beginning of the season, is not that strong. Do we need to worry about the Chiefs' offense?
I don't. I actually see it the opposite, in that their offense has not been a Chiefs offense at all this year, but their defense has quietly been excellent this year. That defense has been very, very good. Their linebackers are playing great. Chris Jones is being Chris Jones. And their secondary is a very underrated secondary that's playing very well. So the way I view the Chiefs right now is that if this defense can keep playing the way that they're playing, Mahomes is going to catch fire eventually. Look, I mean, this happened last year as well. He kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start. Then by the end of the year, he was the clear-cut, unanimous, basically MVP choice, especially with Hurts getting hurt. Mahomes at some point is going to click with these new wide receivers, with this offense. And if the defense is playing the way it's playing now, when that happens, the Chiefs are going to be a scary team to play.
Absolutely. I don't know. I just want to see more, but they're winning, and so you can't fault them too much. Like you said, they're getting it done, and that absolutely means something. That's the Holtz check, where we talk about some quick fire reactions from the Adam Holtz over at sportskita.com, sports writer, podcaster, just NFL stud all around. Go check out his link tree at Adam Holtz Sports. You can find it on the Twitter machine or over at sportskita.com/profile/Adam Holtz. You'll find all this stuff. You just put Sportskita and Adam Holtz, you will find all his stuff. So we're going to move into some of the fantasy stats and numbers that you guys have been wanting, and we go room by room when we do this. We're going to start in the quarterback room, and this is kind of fun when I was putting this together this week. Some interesting numbers here. We get into the fantasy quarterback room. Week 6 saw only 3 quarterbacks eclipse the 20-point mark, as opposed to 10 quarterbacks doing it in week 5. Hurts, Tua, and Goff essentially tying with 22 points and change. Ritter, the lone QB to squeeze out 19 at QB4. Howell, Mahomes, and Jackson land into 18s. Carr at 17s, with T-Law and Stroud breaking 15 measly points, but rounding out the top 10. Hurts, Ritter, Carr, and Stroud all land in the top 10 with losses. Hurts QB1 this week coming off the loss, so a loss can help with your fantasy day. No QB has been in the top 10 every week. Hurts leads with a 5-game streak since week 2. Lamar, Cousins, Allen have 4 trips to the top 10 so far this year. No one has been the fantasy QB twice this season. I think one of the big stats that kind of came out of there that I was surprised at least from the fantasy perspective for this week, is that last week we had 10 quarterbacks break the 20-point barrier. This week we only had 3.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're going to kind of see it across, all the positions this week. Because this was not the biggest scoring type of fantasy week. There was only, a handful of guys who really stood out and put up those monster numbers. I mean, quarterbacks probably, more so than any of them even. This was a very low scoring week for quarterbacks in general. And even some of those names that you mentioned in the top 10, like your Ritters and Howells, were guys that probably weren't in your lineup anyway, unless you're having injury situations or with a deep super flex or something like that.
Now, I have to audible that a little bit because those stats were put together for last night's game. Technically, or not technically, but after last night's game, Prescott lands at number 1. Herbert lands at number 5. So Herbert also has a four-game visit to the top 10, which knocks Lawrence and Stroud out of the top 10. So this week's top 10 is actually Prescott, Hurts, Tua, Goff, Herbert, Ritter, Howell, Mahomes, Jackson, and Carr. So we did have 5 break the 20-point barriers. Justin Herbert just squeaked in with 20.1. But even still, like you said, not huge numbers for fantasy week. Even Dak Prescott, again, at 1 with only 24.9. So, as the season goes on, the rust gets knocked off. We always talk about, the first few weeks are kind of the starters preseason. We're starting to get a much clearer picture of what to expect from certain teams and certain positions. We'll see if that so far six week streak of no one repeating as the top quarterback, even with Prescott up there, still no one has repeated as the week's top quarterback for the season. Is there anybody like you're kind of watching and saying, fantasy wise, maybe I know you're not big on Howell, for instance. Howell does have 2 trips to the top 10. Stroud had 2 trips. He does not anymore after getting knocked off last night. But there's some guys. Ritter has 3 trips inside the top 10. again, the loss helps in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, when we've talked about this a lot too, when you're playing from behind the whole game, it usually means that you have to call a whole lot of passing plays, which can definitely help your fantasy numbers,
Mm-hmm.
especially for these quarterbacks who can run the ball also. Because not only are they calling a bunch of passing plays, but the defense knows they're calling a lot of passing plays and they can send a lot of rushers and pressure the quarterback. So the guys who can kind of scramble around and get some points with their legs too, a guy like a Ritter or even a Howell, even though I don't like him. He has had some pretty decent fantasy games so far this year, kind of for those reasons.
Prescott, care to guess how many times he has been in the top 10 this season? Sits at QB1 this week. How many visits does he have to the weekly
It's either
top
his
10?
first or second. I know he had one other pretty good game this year. I don't know if it broke the top 10, but I know he has one other pretty good fantasy game. It's definitely not more than that, though.
Number one, first time. But if you're going to get there for the first time, you may as well finish as QB1, and that's what Prescott did. But it is his first time in the top 10 this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had one
Um,
other game where he was close to it, but I couldn't remember
yeah,
if
I
he
think it was
finished
like
inside.
11-12, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the RB room, only one running back broke the 30-point mark this week. Only two did it last week. That was. Do you care to take a guess on who that was? Let me not ruin it for you.
Raheem Mustard.
Yes, it was 34.2.
By the
ETN
way, we
Kyron.
shouted him out on our show last week as
We
the
did.
arguably the number one guy to target for DFS. Like if you're going to pay up for
Yep.
someone last week, we said with Achan out with this matchup against the Panthers that
Mm-hmm.
I kind of said if I'm paying up for one guy last week, it was going to be Mostert, and
Yeah,
worked out.
I paid up for Hill as well, but we'll get into the wide receiver room in a second.
Yeah.
ETN, Kyron Williams, Brees Hall. They are 2, 3, and 4. We said Brees Hall might have a good week this week. ETN was kind of a surprise, but he finishes as RB2. They are in the 20 range. King Henry gets back into the top 5 with 19 points. Kind of surprising against Baltimore. Again, he gets the first rushing touchdown against the Ravens this season. Ramondre Stevenson. Had to keep him in my roster. I didn't have a choice. Thank goodness he got 18. Zach Moss, another good week at 17, joined alongside Kenneth Walker III, DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, who finish out the top 10. In this case, we didn't have anybody break into the top 10 from last night's game. Pollard came close at 11, but he was decimals off the run. Interesting names in this category. We talked about Henry doing it against Baltimore. ETN makes an appearance and shows up. Kenneth Walker III against Cincinnati's defense. DeAndre Swift kind of on fire right now over the last couple of weeks. And then Alvin Kamara breaks in the top 10. I mean, not phenomenal numbers. Again, only one guy breaking 30, three guys breaking 20, but running backs, I'm not going to say coming through, but I don't know. What's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, a pretty quiet week for running backs in general, but it's all relative, right? Like if none
Yeah.
of the running backs minus most are putting up big numbers, in that like 15 to 20 point range is the target this week for the top running backs. It's all relative, because it's points against points when it comes to the fantasy matchups, right? So like though someone like Kamara didn't, put up this monster fantasy game, if you had him in your lineup, you probably did better than most opponents that you could be facing this week.
No, that's true. And Kamara and Swift didn't even have a touchdown. They break in the top 10. But like you said, it doesn't matter how low the number is. You had a top 10 back. If you played Kamara, you
Yeah.
played Swift, you had a top 10 back. And ETN and Mostert are the only running backs with 2 touchdowns. That's rushing. Of course, Mostert also had the receiving one. Swift did have a receiving touchdown, so he had a touchdown. Kamara did not. It's interesting to see kind of the up and down between the running backs and the wide receivers over the weeks. But wide receivers come out on top this week. They dominate the scoring outside of the QB position, 18 being the minimum to make the top 10, so a little better than the running backs. The minimum last week, however, as you talked about scoring going down, was 20. So you had to get 20 or more points to make the top 10. You had to get 18 this week. One wide receiver eclipsed the 30-point mark. Jared, take a guess on who that was.
Again, just pick a Dolphin.
Yeah, you're not far off, but it's actually Amon-Ra St. Brown from your favorite team, the Detroit Lions. Yeah, he's the only one who broke 30. Thielen, Hill, Cup, Drake London, A.J. Brown, and Stephon Diggs all broke the 20-point barrier. Pittman Jr. and newcomer to the list, Kendrick Bourne, are in the 19s, and our 118-point guy is Rashid Shaheed. Finishes in the top 10, just ahead of Jalen Waddle, decimal points ahead of Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle almost breaking in the top 10, but he did not. As Rashid Shaheed gets in above Michael Thomas, I might add. Just trying to prop myself up there when I said that Michael Thomas would be feckless this week, and he was. So, again, interesting names here. A lot of teams that did not win. Rashid coming in at 10. Pittman Jr. coming in at 9. Drake London. Man, Drake London breaking in the top 6. Top 5. Top 5 to Drake London. Cup quietly finishes at 4. 3. Hill finishes at 2 as expected, and Stephon Diggs breaks in there. Not huge numbers. Again, a little bit down tick this week, but interesting names. I think that's the story here is the names. And again, no one from last night's game breaking in ahead of that. No, I lied. I take that back. Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen actually pushes the pile down a little bit. He comes in at number 5. Drake London finishes 6. That's why my numbers were messed up, knocking Kendrick Bourne out. CeeDee Lamb almost made it at number 11, which pushes Rashid and Jalen down. But anyway, I digress. The names, again, are the story here with Drake London, Pittman Jr., Kendrick Bourne all making the list.
Yeah, I mean, Drake London, that's kind of the game that a lot of his managers were hoping for, right? I mean, he was drafted as a wide receiver 2 on a lot of fantasy rosters coming into this season because of just, the lack of competition for targets on that team. He has been pretty disappointing to this point. I think he had one other pretty good game this year, so that's kind of what they've been hoping for. But how about Rashid Shaheed? This is his second huge game this season. You know what Shaheed's starting to feel like to me? It's like the Saints version of Gabe Davis. He's going to have these weeks where he explodes for top 10 production and these other weeks where he's outside of the top 50. That's what Gabe Davis has kind of been for the Bills, and that's what Shaheed is kind of this year, though it's very early. He could just be one of those true boomer bust guys if you want to gamble and throw him in your lineup because you've got bad injury situations and guys on buys and your lineup's looking real weak and you need one of those high ceiling guys. Shaheed might be your guy, but just know that his floor is about as low as a floor can be.
This is true, but I mean, Michael Thomas is not producing. Olave is not putting up the numbers that you drafted him for, and that's because Shaheed is stealing and earning those targets. Drake London, like you said, at the game, people are kind of looking for. We'll see if it sustains. Here's an interesting one. Out of the top 10 wide receivers, only the top 5 had a touchdown, and they all only had one. So no multi-touchdown games for anybody at the wide receiver position this week. Nobody got multiple trips to the house this week. That's an interesting stat to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what the trend is on that, but that has to be a very rare stat. How often does that happen in the NFL? I guess rarely ever. But yeah, that's strange.
Yeah, last week we had 2. Their top 2 guys had 3 trips to the end zone. And the week before that, we had multiple guys getting at least 2. Looks like 5 guys getting at least 2, Diggs getting 3 that week. So the fact that nobody had multiple trips this week, it was kind of a low-scoring week. But as you talked about the relativity there, it was low scoring for everybody. It's not like just because you had this player, you were able to blow the doors off people. So I guess fantasy-wise, you hope for more next week, and you feel good if you got the win this week.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I kind of just wish my whole fantasy team was the Dolphins. You know what I mean? Like, if I could just be the Dolphins, you'd probably win every week in fantasy.
Bill's receivers aren't bad right now for fantasy. If you talked about Gabe Davis, Detroit receivers, those are kind of nice to have right now.
Hmm.
So if you could have like Miami and Detroit guys, San Francisco, um,
Yeah. And hey,
you
what
do all
about
right
Adam
there.
Thielen, man? Adam Thielen has
Let's
been
talk about Adam Thielen.
unbelievable this year. I mean, he is a wide receiver one this year. I mean, the amount of targets he's getting is right among the very top in the entire NFL. Like, who knows if this is going to last all year? But obviously, he's the only guy that Bryce Young trusts in this passing game, and he just goes to him as often as he can. I mean, Thielen has probably been the biggest steal of the season so far, right?
Look, the guys finished in the top five, not the top 10, top five, 3 of the last 4 weeks. This is not
Unbelievable.
this is not what they brought. This is not what Carolina brought Thielen in for. This is bonus material right here. They brought him in to be a leader. They brought him to be a stability guy, a guy that they could throw the ball to when they needed to. He was supposed to draw a little coverage, pull a little respect. He was not supposed to be wide receiver one. And I will dispute anybody from the Carolina Panther staff that tries to tell me otherwise. They brought in a veteran to do veteran things. And the fact that he's wide receiver one, the fact that Thielen is wide receiver one out the slot position supports why Carolina is 0-6. However, wow, what a great year for Adam Thielen. I'm happy to see it for him. I mean, he's earned it over his career. He
Yeah, I
should
mean,
be
they
wide
brought him
receiver.
in to be like a Hunter Renfro, right? And it
Yeah,
turns out he's a Cooper Cup.
it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
If you were smart enough, wily enough, took the risk to grab Thielen, you're loving it right now. Keep playing him because there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that he shouldn't keep this up. Because again, he's not supposed to be wide receiver one, so he doesn't get wide receiver one coverage. He plays out of the slot, which is hard to give wide receiver one coverage to anyway. He's not the downfield guy. You have to protect against the downfield guys. And Thielen's just working the underneath, the middle of the field, the outside routes, all the way into the top five every week. So good
Yeah,
for
I
you
mean, it
for
made sense why the Panthers brought him in because he's a great outlet guy for a rookie quarterback.
and he's
But like you
clutch.
said, he was not supposed to see this kind of volume. He was supposed to be the guy there when Bryce Young just had to get rid of the ball because he's under pressure or everything else is covered. He was supposed to be that little safety valve in the offense, but it turns out he's the target machine.
Every week he gets double digit targets, he finishes in the
Yep.
top five. Every
Yep.
week he gets double digit targets, he finishes in the top five. So keep that in mind as the fantasy season goes on. Let's talk about the bye weeks real quick. Interesting bye weeks this week. This is the most we've had. We got no Burrow this week, no Prescott this week, no Jets defense this week. Nobody cares that Carolina won't be there this week, but you won't get Thielen. No Thielen this
Yeah.
week. No Stroud, no Nico this week, and no King Henry this week. All those guys irrelevant. That's going to be a hit for some people. I think the Cincinnati Dallas games will probably have the most impact on fantasy rosters. I don't know if Stroud's necessarily worked his way into a weekly starter. King Henry, you should have a replacement based on how well he's done or not done this season. The Jets defense are streamables. Just don't drop that Jet defense. I'd rather take 0 points than drop the Jets defense if I had to. And Carolina, again, you're going to miss Thielen this week, but hopefully, since he didn't start there, you have a replacement for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the maximum amount of teams that they can put on the bye, right? It's the 16 bye week. This is the big one. There's only one other time this year that they're doing it that way.
Yep.
And, as you pointed out, there's like a good amount of fantasy guys on those 6 teams that are a lot of times weekly starters. So it's going to be an important waiver wire week, an important depth week. How well did you build your bench on your fantasy team? And did you prepare for these bye weeks or did you just go all in on the starting lineup? Those kind of questions are probably going to determine a lot of wins and losses this week.
Mir Badakan, welcome from Pakistan, my friend. Glad to have you here. Join us every Tuesday. Love to have you. Thank you for for joining the show. We're international now. We can say that we are an international show. Officially, we can prove it. We want to say thanks to everybody for joining the show. Again, hopefully you guys will start picking up the phones and calling in. The number does work. I have tested it. We'd love to hear from you guys about your fantasy week. Ask us your questions. Let us know how your fantasy week went. Adam, another great show. A lot of great stats coming out of this one. This week, as we finish it out, Jags at Saints. I like some Jaguar fantasy numbers here. Lions at Ravens. The Ravens defense should tell you not to play anybody, but the Lions offense would tell you otherwise. How do you feel?
I don't love that matchup for the Lions because the Ravens defense has quietly been very good this year. They've been great against the run for the last few years, but where they've made their improvements this year is against the pass. That used to be the Ravens, that they'd shut down the run and give up the pass. They're kind of shutting down both right now.
Falcons at Buccaneers. I don't like that one at all, personally.
Ugh. I mean, I guess, you're going to start your usual Buccaneers, I guess. And, the Falcons are one of those teams,
Evans,
yeah, like the Falcons, but, the Falcons defense is actually very good against the pass. They've actually been a good passing defense. Again, this is one of those weird games where if you have Evans, Godwin, Bijan, London, I'm sure they're going to be in your lineups this week, especially with 6 teams on a bye, but you're not super excited about any of them.
No, you're not. But let me offer some hope in the fact that Ritter and Howell both landed inside the top 10 this week. I think this is a matchup where maybe Mayfield and Ritter once again could make that happen again. Am I off the rails here?
I mean, again, considering there's 6 teams on a bye, I guess that's possible. I would like Mayfield maybe a little bit more than Ritter. The Bucs defense is still better, in my opinion, than a lot of people give them credit for, and they do get after the quarterback. That is the signature of Todd Bowles, their head coach, is pressuring opposing quarterbacks, and he is doing it again this year.
Commanders and Giants. I know you don't like Howell, but I like Howell against the Giants. I like anybody against the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, Howell, I guess, is a fine streamer if you have one of those quarterbacks who's on a bye or one of the ones that are injured, like a Fields.
Super flex.
Yeah, or in a super flex type situation. Give me Brian Robinson this week, though. I'm all in on Brian Robinson this week. That's a DFS play for me. If he's on your lineups, you're probably starting him just about every week anyway. But if you want to target someone with some upside in DFS this week, Brian Robinson.
I'm not mad at Saquon this week either. Raiders at Bears. You should get some fantasy value out of that one. Both these defenses not fantastic. Bears defense absolutely horrible. Might get some Devontae Adams this week against the Bears.
Yeah, you can go with your Raiders this week. Jacobs, Myers, Devontae, those are guys that are obviously in your weekly lineups. For DFS, they're all good targets this week as well in a plus situation. Let's remember, too, Justin Fields is probably not playing this week. It's not looking good that Justin Fields is going to play, which also means that the Raiders will probably have even more offensive possessions than usual because the Bears, they struggle to move the ball in that offense anyway. Without Fields, that offense will probably be a disaster this week, which could be additional opportunities for your Devontaes and your Jacobs and your Myers.
Bills at Patriots. Play all your Bills. Play them all. Belichick just
play your Bills, bench your Patriots.
Yeah. Belichick's not even trying anymore. Browns.
I mean, is he tanking? Is Belichick tanking?
I don't think he's even tanking. I just think he's not trying. I just don't think he's even trying anymore. I think he let me go, keep me here. I don't care. I'll come in. I'll show up. I'll stand on the sidelines. I'll go to the press conferences because I don't say anything anyway. I don't care.
I don't know if I agree with that because I think he wants to pass Shula. I think Belichick wants to pass Shula's win record.
But I don't think he can do it. I think he knows he can't do it with this team right now.
But what if him and Kraft had a conversation of let's kind of tank it this year. Let's leave Mac Jones in there. He'll lose us a whole bunch of games, and let's go draft a quarterback in this loaded class coming up.
That's possible. I mean, there's no reason. Like you said, mediocrity means nothing in the NFL. So to end up,
but they're not mediocre. They're bad. They're not mediocre. They're bad.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. You don't want to rise to me,
Exactly.
okay, you're horrible right now. Don't screw it up.
Belichick's a smart guy, and maybe he brought that to Kraft. Like, look, we can't win with Mac Jones. Let's
Everybody
leave
knows
him
they
in
can't
there
win with
this
Mac
year.
Jones.
Let
That's it.
ourselves be terrible and go get, Drake May or Caleb Williams or, one of these big names coming out.
Because the conversation was had, maybe we go get Cousins. Let's go get Cousins to save our season. Okay, why would we want to do that? Cousins going to play a couple more years, and then we're back in the same fucking boat. No, let's go get a fucking rookie. Let's.
And it's the same thing. Like, what if Cousins does help them get to the playoffs? They're not going anywhere. They're not.
I don't even think they get to the playoffs.
Even if they sneak in, they're not going anywhere. So, like, why bother?
The way Miami and the Bills are playing right now, they're not. No, it's done. It's possible. I'm with you. I understand what you're saying, and I believe you as always. NFL
Look out for Malik Cunningham. He might be starting pretty soon.
I don't see it though. Why?
Yeah.
You want to lose. You want to lose. Keep Mac in there.
I don't think he's going to win many games either.
That's what I think is the biggest supporting evidence to your argument about the Patriots saying the fact that Mac is still in there.
Yeah.
If you wanted to change, Belichick even said we got to change everything. We got to absolutely change everything, but he didn't change anything. So
yeah,
I'm with you. Browns at Colts. Minshew up against the Browns defense. It's in Indianapolis. It's Minshew. He's got the starting job. He's going to be fired up. JT, more action every week. They're going to get trounced by the Browns. Browns defense going to suck.
I have no interest in any Colts players this week. After how bad they looked last week, and now they got to play a defense like the Browns, I will pass on all the Colts.
Kareem Hunt, time to move him up. Maybe. It's getting work. Showing he can get it done. Steelers at Rams. My Steelers at the Rams. I actually like fantasy plays in this one. I do.
I think this could be a high-scoring game. I think both offenses look pretty good fantasy-wise in this one. Obviously, the thing you have to pay attention to is the Rams running back room. It looks like Kyron Williams and Ronnie Rivers are both going to be out. Could be Zach Evans starting this game, which in DFS is a ridiculously cheap option if he is in fact the starter. To me, I'm not thinking big things from Zach Evans, but to get a starting running back at basically zero cost, why not?
I don't like it because it's the Steelers. That's why. Cardinals at Seahawks. Seahawks should win this game. Again, the Cardinals will give them a rough time, but it's in Seattle, so Seattle should win this game. The thing with Seattle is you can't, other than Geno, like I said, this is why I bought lots of shares of Geno and nobody else. You don't know who's going to get the ball. You don't know who's going to show out every week. You don't know if anybody's going to show out every week. Last week it was Walker. The week before that it was Lockett. The week before that it was Metcalf. I like Geno, and that's about it.
I actually agree with you, especially with JSN. His playing time has been increasing. He hasn't put up a bunch of numbers, but he's been on the field more lately. So that transition could kind of be happening as well as they start to try to feed him the ball a little bit. I'm 100% in agreement with you that after Geno, I do still like Walker. Walker.
I like him. You just don't know what you're going to get. I agree.
Yeah, Walker's not like a top 5 running back or anything like that, but he's still, a pretty solid option with a fairly high floor at least. But I do agree with you that it's hard to get excited about anybody really in the Seahawks offense because they have so many options.
He landed in the top 10 this week. You never know. Packers at just disgusting, horrible Broncos, horrible defense. Go ahead and play love. Play your Packers receivers, but gosh darn it, if you have Aaron Jones, if you need a win, trade something. Aaron Jones should be RB1 this week.
Yeah, talking about, paying up for certain guys in DFS too, like Aaron Jones needs to be in DFS lineups.
Yes,
he should have a huge day against this disastrous defense. Aaron Jones is the guy to target this week. You're 100% right.
Loving it. Chargers at Chiefs should be a good game. Should get lots of offense. That defense has stepped up. Man, what a difference Chris Jones makes. He earns that paycheck every single game. Offensive guys, when they get the bag, the production goes down. Defensive guys, they are the exact opposite. Chris Jones, the defense before he got in those first couple weeks to since he's been in, wow. I'm still, Chiefs may be winning, maybe not, a little ugly, maybe not as flashy as normal, but Chiefs win this game because of that defense.
Well, yeah, he reminded everybody why he was demanding and holding out for all that money because he is an absolute game changer, you know?
Force on the field.
After Aaron Donald, like, it's Aaron Donald is obviously, you know, the best interior defensive lineman over the last few years. Second is Chris Jones. And then after Chris Jones, there is a huge drop off after that for guys on the interior of defensive lines who can really change a game.
Absolutely. It hurts for Eckler owners because you've been waiting so long for Eckler to get back, and then you get a game last night, which you had to expect wasn't going to be great, Dallas's defense. Yeah. And then, you know, now they get the Chiefs defense and Chris Jones. Dolphins
I think
at
Eckler
Eagles.
will be okay because of the receiving. So? You know, they're still going to throw it to him out in the flat. Eckler's still going to get his touches. He doesn't run the ball down the middle all that often anyway. So get Eckler on the perimeter, and I think he'll be okay. You're muted. You're muted.
I'm muted. Oh no. Yeah, I got a little guest on the show. He's kind of a talker, but he wants to be on the show. And so he can be here because he's pretty smart on this stuff too. Dolphins at Eagles game of the week. Again, champs versus chumps tomorrow night. You are not going to want to miss it as they pull this one out. Judge Jordan will be there presiding as two super fans duke it out. Champs versus chumps, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Fantasy Sports Core Network. It is the game of the week. I agree with that. I think this is the one that could go back and forth, and we don't know what we're going to get. And honestly, it's hard to call this one. I guess you give Dolphins the edge, especially with the Eagles coming off the loss. But at the same time, Eagles coming off the loss, they're going to be fired up. They're going to be at home. Dolphins are going to get tested, at least in this one.
There are so many great storylines about this game. You know, like you didn't even mention, you know, like the Tua versus Hurts thing. You know, like that's a big deal that goes all the way back to Alabama. Two teams that could be Super Bowl contenders this year. Like you said, the Eagles coming off of a loss. It's hard to imagine them losing 2 games in a row. But, you know, the way the Dolphins are playing, that definitely could happen. Everything to love about this game. It's the perfect primetime game for this week. Definitely game of the week. And from a fantasy perspective, just start everybody.
Everybody. Play them all.
There's nobody to fade in this game. Start them all.
Nope. Everybody. Waddle, play them. Mostert, play them. Tua, play them. Hurts, AJ, all of them. Play them all. Get everybody in. Every single one. And on Monday night, not a horrible game. I actually kind of like this game. Niners at Vikings. It should be worth watching. It's not going to be as good as Dolphins Eagles. I got that. Monday night rarely is, but it's a watchable game. It's one that you can get into. It's Niners at Vikings. Niners coming off the loss. Might not have CMC. They won't have 100% CMC. Debo might not be there. Likely to be there. Will not be 100%. You know, guys are banged up. Coming off the loss, going into Minnesota. But Minnesota's without Jefferson. They don't have a great defense. I still expect the Niners to win this game. I still like my fantasy people here too. Even against the Niners defense, I still, they're not my favorite guys, but, you know, I'll play them if I have to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like Vikings for fantasy this week.
They're going to be playing from behind.
Defense. They are, but, you know, the receivers, for me, none of them are really too exciting this week. Hawkinson is in for a tough day because the Niners are excellent against tight ends with Fred Warner in the middle of the field there. You know, for me, it's start your 49ers, and if you can avoid your Vikings, do so. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to start Madison this week, but I'm okay with Vikings receivers. Cousins puts up numbers again. He's got multiple trips on that top 10 list this year. I'm okay with him. But anyway, you know, some good DFS picks this week. We talked about Evans being a steal DFS-wise with the Rams. We talked about the Chargers and the Chiefs, Dolphins and Eagles. If you're going to pay up for Aaron Jones this week. I'm not even mad if you go ahead and throw Jordan Love in there so that you can pay up for you know, a Hill or something like that. It's going to be a fun week in DFS, lots of opportunities to make money. It's going to be a fun week in fantasy. It's going to be a fun week in football. It always is, especially when you have Adam Holes. One more time, Adam Holes at Adam Holes Sports, NFL writer at Sportskeeda. Go to Sportskeeda, put the / put Adam Holes, and you'll find it. Or just put Sportskeeda Adam Holes into your search engine, and he will pop up. You can see this and many, many other entertaining shows from TSS Fantasy, from the Millie Goats. We've got wrestling, we've got MMA on the Fantasy Sports Core Network. You are going to want to catch those. Thanks for joining us on the show, Adam. As always, great show. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week, I hope, correct?
We'll be here again next week to start the second third of the 2023 season.
1/3 of the season gone already. So crazy. We'll have more amazing stats for you. We'll have behind the scenes looks. We'll have it all. And you guys can even call in. The phone line does work. Give us a call next week. We'd love to hear from you. We want to get this phone line working, running, because it's going to be really cool once you guys call in. So make sure to do that as well. Thanks for joining us on That EFIN Morning Show. We're here every single Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. to talk about your fantasy week and just kind of wrap things up and get you a head start on week 7. Leave us comments, follow us, subscribe, and join us next week. We'll see you everybody then. Until then, be safe. Happy fantasy football, and we will see you guys next week.